We're gonna go over if deloads are worthless, and we're gonna start right now. One big factor is that a lot of times guys are at the gym, and women, and you're training at the gym and you just feel tired, you're feeling fatigued. And what ends up happening is you got some gym bro and he's like, yo dog, you got a deload, you gotta take some time off. And they might tell you a traditional deload would look like 50% less volume. So you're doing, instead of 35 reps on the bench press, now you're doing 15, something like that, 17, somewhere along those lines. The next step is, okay, we're gonna deload volume, we're also deloading intensity. Let's take 50% of the weight off. So if you're used to benching 225, now you're just gonna bench somewhere around 115 to 130, somewhere in that realm. That's a standard deload. The big issue here, and one of the big exposures that I had to deloads, is something that I've used and something I've applied with a lot of my Olympic athletes. This past year, even in Paris, I spent a lot of time talking to other Olympic coaches about their deload methodology. And we all shared a similar sentiment that sometimes deloads are totally worthless. Okay, one thing that I learned was from Charles Poliquin, is that Poliquin would say, go 66% of your total volume, but keep intensity high. Okay, that's another standard. Dr. Bondarchuk, who I train with, who's an Olympic champion, would say, you don't really need deloads. You need to plan training accordingly and get the proper reaction from that specific type of athlete. So, what does the science tell us? 10,000 makes the best training gear and the best and only shorts that you will ever need. They're designed with purpose and absolute quality and capability. One of the biggest things that I was hesitant about was, I go for runs all the time. I've run a couple marathons. I do a lot of lifting. Are these shorts really that comfortable, really that good for me to be able to squat and go out for a run? And funny thing is that when I saw that they had over 36,000 5-star reviews, I was down for it. I went with it, and even this morning I took over 10,000 steps when I went out for my 6.7 mile run in these sweet interval shorts. And one thing I'd even say is that when we're doing jumps and bounds and anything along these lines, squatting, sprinting, running, I feel absolutely fantastic with these high intensity interval training shorts. They move well, they breathe well, they're absolutely fantastic, and they're unbelievably comfortable. If you're looking to upgrade your training gear, try 10,000 and we're gonna give you 15% off your first order. All you've gotta do is go to 10,000.cc/garage strength15 to get their premium training gear. That's 10,000, TENTHOUSAND.cc/garage strength 15, GARAGESTRENGTH 15. So recently, researchers got 39 different individuals, okay? They got these 39 individuals, they split them into two different groups. One group that was gonna train for 9 straight weeks, another group that midway through, they would take off for the entire week. Now, in the beginning of the paper, of the beginning of the research, they were testing leg strength. They were looking at leg size, okay? What type of muscle mass do they have? And they even were testing their readiness. They were asking them with a questionnaire, how do you feel on a daily basis? And then, as they went through those 9 weeks, they wanted to see, okay, at the end of 9 weeks, who had bigger legs, okay? Who was more explosive, who was stronger, and who in every single day of training had a better mental approach. Because oftentimes, people who deload, they will deload because of the reason that they feel sluggish. They're not motivated when they get into the gym. They feel like they're just stale. So their gym bro tells them to take that deload. But then what does the research tell us based off of what the paper actually was looking for? So some of the things around fatigue, when we're thinking about actual deloads, being sluggish, stuff like that, a lot of fatigue and sluggishness is typically going to be localized to a specific muscle group. So if you're training your bench 3 or 4 days a week, your bench or your pecs, your shoulders, your triceps, they're gonna be ultimately very, very fatigued. So we just have to be aware that when we're thinking about deloads, it's typically localized. So if it's a localized aspect, you need to have the right program. If we have a right program, we're thinking through, okay, one day we might train legs. Next day we might train upper body. Next day we might do jumps. Then you might have a day off, and then you might have some more leg strength work, something like that. And that's exactly what we do inside of our strength training at Peak Strength. We think through the lens of fatigue and how it factors into this formula that's gonna lead to better sports performance. So if you need help with your program, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. You can download that today. Now, the actual results. When they looked at these 39 different individuals, some of the big factors they saw is that there was no difference on leg size. There was no difference between the deload versus the actual guys that didn't take a deload. The other thing though that they did look at, there was three big aspects. Isometrically, the guys that did not deload were stronger. The other big factor, they were also more explosive. They had more dynamic strength, okay? And then finally, what's interesting, and this factors into the discussion that I had with a lot of the coaches at the Olympics in Paris this year, is that they had better readiness on a regular occasion. Okay, so every time they would come into the gym, they would feel a bit better. And I think that this comes back to a lot of coaches have noticed that when you take a traditional deload, oftentimes the athletes are fatigued when they come back. They're unmotivated. They're actually not seeing what they expect out of that deload because everything tends to be localized. My recommendations, first thing, of course, you got to download Peak Strength so that you have a decent program that you're going to be using. The second big factor is that you need to be training consistently for a long period of time. With most of our high school kids here, most of our collegiate athletes, we don't even program deloads because there's going to be a time when they have to take finals, so they're not going to train for 3 to 4 days. There's going to be a time when their parents want to spoil them and take them out on vacation or something like that. There's going to be a couple days where they get sick. Okay, that's going to actually help them with recovery. With that being said, what I recommend is every 15 to 20 weeks, take 3 or 4 days off. And if you, inside of those 15 to 20 weeks, if you do feel sluggish, maybe you go about 60% volume, but you still keep that intensity where it needs to be based off of when you're trying to peak. And then ultimately, if you are a coach, okay, or you're an athlete, we need to figure out, do you peak well when you taper, or do you peak poorly? Do you feel sluggish? Do you feel unmotivated? I think that over a long period of time, I don't even think that kids that are training for 2-3 years, they really shouldn't get a deload until they have like 3 years of a training age. Okay, that's one big key that I like to think through, because they're getting stronger for such a long period of time because they're so new to resistance-based training. But ultimately, when we're peaking athletes, we have to test and experiment. Do they lift better when they're under a heavy load? Do they lift better when they have a 60 to 70% deload? Do they lift better when they have a 50 to 60% deload? And then ultimately set those tests up. And then over that long period of time, over that athlete's career, you'll see that that changes as they get more advanced. It's not an end all be all. So again, if you need help, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Deloads are not the absolute answer to everything. Sometimes they can be for injury prevention, but sometimes people that don't deload, they feel a little bit tougher on that daily basis. Because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.